Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. This year is Ilu Nishmas, my grandmother, Esther Malka, Bas Alterdun Eisenberger. She was born in Poland around 1910 or so. We're not sure exactly. But she was known... It's okay. She was married to my grandfather, and they were in the Lower East Side, and then he was a rabbi in Buffalo for 25 years, and their acts of Chesed were legendary, and we have a connection with Rabbi Leff for many years. We lived in Miami for 35 years. When we got there, Rabbi Leff was there. Rabbi Leff learned in the Tel Yeshiva with my uncle, Shlomo Eisenberger. And it's a great honor for us to have Rabbi Leff speak. And thank you very much.
I first want to thank the family for giving me the honor and the schus of being able to give this shiur, especially since I had a close connection with many parts of the family, the Eisenberger and the Kahana family, and I had many occasions where I was able to become acquainted with the Niftarim. So I want to dedicate the Divrei Torah Le'ilui Nishmas, both of them, Rav Michoel ben Rav David and Esther Malka bas Alterdun, Aleim Hashalom. The Niftarim excelled in many areas, many midos, both Bein Adam L'Makom and Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. But one midah that they excelled in superbly was the midah of Chesed. And therefore it was decided that the shiur should be dedicated to the inyan of Chesed. Chesed, on the one hand, we find is the foundation of all midos tovos. According to many mefarshim, leiv tov is the foundation of midos tovos, and leiv tov means a bal chesed, person with a good heart. We'll see a little bit later why the heart is a symbol of Chesed. In addition, Chesed is the foundation of the entire world. Olam Chesed Yiboneh. The world exists on Torah, Avoda, and Gemilus Chasodim. That doesn't mean that they are three independent pillars, but the world, under the world is Torah, under that is Avoda, and the foundation of all of that is Gemilus Chasodim. Chazal tell us that Torah is Tchilasa Gemilus Chasodim, V'sofa Gemilus Chasodim. Torah begins with the Chesed, Adam HaKadosh Baruch Hu clothed Adam and Chava, and then ends with the Chesed that the Rabbanu Shalom buried Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Maharal says that the beginning and end of something is its place of kesher. What connects the Torah to the Rabbanu Shalom, and on the other side connects the Torah to us, is Chesed. In addition, the beginning and end of something represents what its essence is. And the Torah is the essence of Chesed. Rav Aaron Kotler Zatzal asks, in the morning we say the Braisa, the whole list of Chasodim, and then we say the Talmud Torah Keneged Kula. He says it's apples and oranges. Talmud Torah is Bein Adam L'Makom, and all these other things are Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. But he says no. The greatest Chesed that exists is a person sitting and learning Torah. Because without the Torah, there is no world. And therefore, all the other chasodim are specific to certain things. But without a world, there can't be any chesed. So the greatest chesed is someone who creates the world itself. Talmud Torah Keneged Kula. However, all of that seems to be very well understood. What doesn't seem to be well understood is that there is a tremendous relationship between Chesed and Emunah. There's a medrash that says the following. Kol hagomel chesed ki'ilu ma'amin b'chol hanisim she'osa HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'otzionu b'Mitzrayim v'chol she'eino gomel chesed ki'ilu kofer. A person who's a gomel chesed is a maimin. And a person who's not a gomel chesed is ki'ilu eino maimin. What is the connection? Chesed is between man, and emunah is totally between man and God. What's the connection? But we find this same connection in another place. Avraham Avinu, on the one hand, was Amud HaChesed. He was the pillar of Chesed, the epitome of Chesed. On the other hand, Avraham Avinu was Rosh HaMa'aminim, the choice Maimin. So in Avraham Avinu, we find also this connection between Chesed and Emunah. What's the connection? Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Hashem Yimkom Damo, in Kovetz Ma'amorim, asks a very interesting question. He asks quite a few questions there. He says, the Torah says, Lo sasuru achrei levavchem va'acharei einechem. You shouldn't stray after your eyes and your heart. So eyes, the Gemara says, refers to immorality, which I understand. That when you see something, that's what brings you and draws you towards it. The sin of immorality is dependent on the eyes. But acharei levavchem, Chazal say, zehu minus. That is false ideologies, apikursis. Says Rabbi Chanan, apikursis, I would say, is in your mind, not in your heart. The heart is the seat of emotion. Your mind is the intellect. A person's false ideologies, apikursis, emanates from the intellect, not from the heart, not from the emotion. Basically, what he says is not like that. Basically, everybody deep down, if they would be objective and look at the world properly, they'd see there has to be a God. There can't be such an orderly, complicated, complex world that there was no creator. The creation testifies to the fact that there's a creator. So why are there so many intelligent people who don't believe in God? Not because their intellect pushes them the wrong way, because their heart pushes them the wrong way. They don't want to believe in God. Because believing in God commits one to a plan, to a creator, and a person who believes in God has to realize that he was created for a purpose and he has to fulfill that purpose. No different than if a person buys an automobile and he gets a owner's manual to the automobile. So even though it's his car, he can do what he wants with it. But if he doesn't follow the design of the manufacturer, of the designer, the car is not going to function. The car was designed to run on gasoline, not on water. If you put water in the gas tank, it's your car. You can do whatever you want with it. But it's not going to go anywhere. So you have to follow the design of the designer. If the world's a Hefkerveld and everything came by accident, then everything's an accident. Nothing has any meaning to it. Do what you want. But if the world was created with a purpose by an intelligent creator, then you're bound to follow the design of that creator. You have free choice. You can do what you want, but you're not going to go anywhere. Your motor's going to burn out. So the Torah is nothing different on one level than the owner's manual to the world. The Rabbi Shem created the world, and he said, look, this is what I created it to be, it's to be used, how it was meant to function. You have a choice. You can choose to put water in your gas tank if you want, but you're not going to go anywhere with it. So you can choose to eat what you want and dress like you like and think what you want to say and say what you want to say, but you're not going to get where you're supposed to go. So people don't want to believe in a God. They don't want to be committed. They don't want to be hemmed in, per se, and told what to do. They'd rather be hefker. So it's not their mind that leads them astray. It's their emotions that lead them astray. There's a medrash. Medrash says that when the Ribono Shel Olam was dictating the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, they came right away to the pasuk, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu. Let us make man, in the plural. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I can't write this. Atanosein pischon pele minim. You're giving an opening to the minim, the people who believe in more than one God. Some say the minim were the early Christians who believed in a trinity. It says here in plural, let us make man. You're giving them a place to make a mistake. The Rabbi told Moshe Rabbeinu, you write, the yahrtzeits litos yite. Whoever wants to make a mistake, let him make a mistake. That doesn't sound like the Rabbi is too sensitive to causing people to make mistakes. When he commanded us, Lifnei iver lo sitein Michoel, you're not allowed to put a stumbling block in front of a person and make a mistake. So why isn't the Rabbi concerned that if he writes Naaseh Adam, people are going to make a mistake? The Bali Musar say what it means is the following. No one ever became an apikoros because it says Naaseh Adam. No first grader ever raised his hand in first grade, came to this pasuk and said, I got to go down the block to the convent because it says here, let us make man. You look in Rashi, and Rashi says, why does it say in the plural? Because the Rabbi wanted to teach us a lesson that he asked advice from the angels before he created the world, and we should also ask advice no matter who the person is, even much lower than us. There's no one lower than us than the angels are from the Rabbi Shalom. And if the Rabbi Shalom can ask advice from the angels, we can ask advice from anybody. And it's clear that it doesn't mean there's more than one God, because the end of the pasuk says, Vayas Elokim, in the singular. No one ever became an apikoros, not in first grade or seventh grade, or no Baal Tshuva who started learning Bereshis. But yahrtzeits litos, person who wants to make a mistake, is going to make a mistake no matter what's there. You can distort anything. It's not your intellect that pushes you off, and therefore what it says over here is not going to lead anybody astray. But a person who wants to be led astray will bring his proofs from anywhere. Nothing's going to help. I remember when I was my first Zman in Telz, I spent Sukkot in New York, and by a Rav there. And this Rav got a letter from a goy who thought he was Mashiach. This was many years ago, before the internet. But he wanted to get his name out in the world, to convince the world that he was Mashiach. So he came upon the following genius idea. He decided he'll write to clergymen, rabbis, priests, ministers, with 10 proofs that he's Mashiach. And once he convinces them that he's Mashiach, he'll ask them to convince their congregations. So with one letter, he can reach tens of people, maybe hundreds of people. I saw this letter that this Rav got. There were 10 proofs. I don't remember all of them. I remember one of them, and they all were along these lines. The first proof, conclusive, that he was Mashiach was the following. It says in Yeshayahu that Mashiach will be lamala mimalachim, literally translated in English, above kings. He said it is clear that Yeshayahu was referring to me. Why? Because in the apartment underneath me there are 2 dogs named King, and that puts me above kings. Yahrtzeits litos yite. Person wants to make a mistake, he's going to distort anything to prove his point. It's not your intellect that leads you astray, it's your heart. Chaim Volozhiner had a Talmud who went off the derech. Even in those days, people went off the derech. So this Talmud remained connected to Reb Chaim, and he came back to visit the yeshiva. Reb Chaim said to him, my Talmud, what happened to you? Why did you go off the derech? He said, Rebbe, I had a lot of questions. He said, tell me. Before I attempt to answer your questions, tell me something. When you were sitting and learning in the yeshiva, did those questions bother you? He said, no. They only bothered me after I left the yeshiva. He said, then those aren't your questions. Those are your answers. He said, you left the yeshiva, you saw a big world out there, and your Yetzer Hara wanted you to jump in, but your conscience wouldn't let you. So you created all these questions to answer your conscience. I can answer questions. I can't answer answers. That's the way a person is. Person is very subjective, sees what he wants to see. The Bali Musar say, what's the difference between a window and a mirror? From a window, you can see the whole world. From a mirror, you only see yourself. What's the difference between them? A little kesef, a little silver. Put a little silver on the window, all you see is yourself. Silver is not only money, but silver, kesef, means kisufim, desires. If you let your desires and your wants get in the way, then all you see is what you want to see. If you're able to be objective then you're able to see the entire world. Chesed is the midah of nesina, of being a giver, not a taker. A person who can give is able to divest himself of his subjectivity, of his negias, and be able to see things objectively. He's the person who can come to emunah. That kind of person can be a maimin. The Rabbanu Shalom is everywhere, but he only can be seen by people who want to see him. People who don't want to see him are going to see everything in the place, if that's what they want to see. And therefore a person who can be a giver, divest himself, of his own ego, and be able to think about others and not only about himself, that kind of person is a person will come to emunah. And that is one relationship, one idea between the connection between emunah and chesed. There's a second idea. The Maharal says that a person who's a nosing, who's a bal chesed, who's a giver, is a more spiritual person. He's more aligned with spirituality, because a person who's always taking is always involved more with his gashmias, with his material side, with his physical side. The more a person's a giver, the more he's dom el Hashem, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the ultimate giver. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes nothing. He only gives. He's the ultimate giver. A person who's a giver is on the one hand more spiritual, and he's also more like the Rabbanu Shalom. A person who's more spiritual and more like the Rabbanu Shalom has a greater chance of being able to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to have a connection to him. A person who is less like HaKadosh Baruch Hu and more material-minded, more a taker, is a kind of person who's not going to be able to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore there's a tremendous connection between giving, chesed, and emunah. In addition, a person who's a giver, who's able to be sensitive to other people, is an Adam Gadol. And he also has an opportunity of being less of a small person focused on himself. Because he focuses on other people, he's more connected to other people. Reb Shimon Shkop, in his Hagdama to Shara Yosher, asks a very simple question. On the one hand, the Torah mandates that a person have self-concern. You're supposed to be concerned about yourself. You always come first. If you need tzedakah and other people need tzedakah and you only have a certain amount of money, you come first. You have an article getting lost and somebody else, even your Rebbe, your father, mother, have an article getting lost and you can only save one of them, you save yours first. If your life needs to be supported and other people's, you come first. Chayecha kodmi. Everything you come first. Self-concern is a legitimate mandate of the Torah. On the other hand, you can't only be concerned about yourself. You have to be concerned about other people too. So many times there's a tremendous conflict between self-concern and concern for other people. How do you resolve that conflict? Says Reb Shimon, that conflict only exists if a person considers himself from his toes to his head and everybody else is everybody else. Then there's tremendous conflict between me and all those other people. But some people are bigger than that. And they realize that their spouse is part and parcel of them. Ishto kegufo, baal ke ishto. When they're concerned about their spouse, they're not concerned about somebody else. They're concerned about themselves, but themselves is two bodies. Some people are bigger than that. And they know that their children are part and parcel of them. Bro kara davuam. And when they're concerned about their children, they're not concerned about somebody else. They're concerned about themselves, self-concern. Except now the self-concern is many bodies. Some people understand that their extended family, uncles, aunts, cousins, is all part of them. So when they're concerned about their extended family, they're also concerned about themselves. That's self-concern. Some people understand that their neighborhood, their city, their country, all of Klal Yisrael is part of them. Then there's no conflict anymore. It's all self-concern. Just a matter of priorities. And even though that sounds only like semantics, what difference does it make if all those other people are just parts of me, but other parts of me? I still have to decide whether this part of me or that part of me. It's not the same thing. The Ger Rebbe asked a tremendous question on 2 weeks ago, said, Yaakov Avinu wants to find a pillow. There's 12 stones. Each one is big enough to be the pillow. And they're arguing amongst themselves. Which one's going to have Yaakov Avinu's head on it? So the Rebbe makes a nace and he fuses all these stones together. Says the Ger Rebbe, what did that help? The stone is now 12 times the size of Yaakov's head. His head's going to only go on 1/12 of that stone. Why aren't they still arguing on which part of the stone? So there's a very big difference. When they're separate stones, it makes a difference which stone. When they're all one, it doesn't make a difference anymore if it's this part of me or that part of me. It's all the same thing. It's just a matter of priority. When a person thinks that all those other people out there are somebody else, tremendous conflict between self-concern and concern for others. When a person realizes that everybody is all part of me and it's all self-concern, it's only a matter of priority, it's not such a conflict. And Rav Shimon says that's the meaning of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Im ein ani li mili. If I don't care about myself, who's going to care about me? I have to be concerned about myself. But kishani li atzmi, when my ani is only little me, mo ani, that's not an ani. My ani has to encompass everybody. And I think there's a hint in the word ani to this idea. The word ani, on the one hand, is an aleph, that's the individual. On the other side is a yud, that's a tzibur. That's all everybody else out there is represented by the number 10, a tzibur. It says by Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayigdal Moshe. First it says Vayigdal Hayeled. Then it says Vayigdal Moshe. So the Ramban says the first one was physically. He grew up physically. The second one is he was called a gadol. He matured. What made him an Adam gadol? Vayetzel echa vayar b'sivlosam. He was able to connect himself and empathize with other Yidden and to feel what they were feeling, to mamish feel part of them. Rashi says, Nosan eina v'libo lios meitzr aleim. He had to put his eyes and his heart. In order to feel that someone else is mamish part of you, you need two things. One, you need eyes, you need seichel. Because if you don't have any seichel, you'll never realize what the other person really needs. And you may end up doing for another person what you think is good for them is really not good for them. So you need eyes, you need seichel. But if you only have seichel, you'll make a lot of studies on poverty, but you never help anybody. You need a heart too. You need emotions also. So you need eina v'libo. The aleph is the individual. The yud is the tzibur. What connects them to make them all part of your ani? Nun. There are 50 gates of wisdom and 50 gates of purity. Chamishim sharei bina, chamishim sharei tahara. If you have that bina and you have that tahara, you have that nun, you can put it in the middle, connect the yud and the aleph and make that your ani. That's what you are. That's a Bal Chesed. A Bal Chesed is a person who can connect himself to other people, lose that look in the mirror of only himself. And that's the kind of person who's a great person, who can then have that connection to the Rabbanu Shalom. There's only one big problem here. And that is, the Michoel Milio says this concept that Chesed is the concept of Nesina. There are two kinds of people in this world. There's givers and there's takers, and you should always try to be a giver and not a taker. But if everybody follows that advice, then who are we going to give to? Nobody's taking, you can't give. So we got to have at least one token taker so everybody could give. Beyond that, Avraham Avinu is the Amud HaChesed. So he is a giver, he's not a taker. Where is the example? Melech Sodom, king of Sodom, wants to give Avraham Avinu all the spoils of the war, and Avraham Avinu says, Michut v'ad srochnal, I don't take it. Not a shoelace, not anything. Keep it, take it all for yourself. Avraham Avinu is the ultimate giver and not taker. Except there's a big problem with that. Avraham Avinu did a good job of taking in other cases. Paro gave him a lot of presents, he took them. He didn't say, I don't take presents, he took them, God's fine. Avimelech gave him tremendous presents, and he took it. According to one opinion, Malki Tzedek gave Avram Avinu Meiser, and he took it. So out of 4 cases, 3 of them Avram took, and only 1 he didn't. So why is Avram Avinu a giver and not a taker? Seems to me like he knew how to take also. The answer is very simple, and it's a tremendous yesod in what Chesed really is. Giving and taking does not depend on the person giving out and the person receiving. Sometimes giving out is really taking, and sometimes receiving is really giving. Let me explain to you how that is. Start with another question. Avram Avinu is about Chesed. The Torah gives us an example of his Chesed with the Hachnosas Orchid, with the angels. Malachim come, Avram Avinu invites him to his house, and he puts him under a tree to eat. Now, if I invited people to my house and left them under a tree, and I had a beautiful, airy house, right? So it was nice and comfortable, and a beautiful home the Stam Avram Avinu had, and I left them outside under a tree, my wife would have my head. What kind of host are you? Leave your guests under a tree? Bring them in the house. Treat them royally. So maybe Avram Avinu did something wrong. The Medrash says that in the schus that Avram Avinu left those angels under a tree, we have the mitzvah of sukkah. So he must have done something right. Why? The answer, I'll give you an example. Imagine you want to be kind the mitzvah of Bikr Cholim. Somebody's sick, you want to go visit them, you want to do a chesed, give them a visit. You're a tremendous giver. Spend time and money to go visit this person in the hospital. When you get there, the person's asleep. Chutzpah, I came all this way, spent all this money, and you're asleep? I want to have my mitzvah, Bikr Cholim. Now, usually the hardest thing to do in a hospital is to get to sleep. And people who are sick usually need to sleep. So the fact that the person's sleeping is a tremendous thing for them. Sometimes the person would rather be woken up, but most of the time not. But you want your mitzvah. So if you are refined, you send the nurse in to see if the person's really sleeping. Mean, wake them up, I'm here. If you're not so refined, you walk into the room, knock over a chair, a little table, make a lot of noise, the person wakes up, and you say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. You did mean to wake them because you want your mitzvah. In that situation, you look like the giver, but you're really the taker. You're manipulating that person to get your mitzvah, Bikr Cholim. You're not doing what's good for them, doing what's good for you. If you do what's good for them, you'd leave them a note. I was here. I saw you were sleeping. I didn't want to wake you because I know that you're not feeling well. And Amir Hashem, if you want, I'll come back. But I want my mitzvah. So I'm using you to get a mitzvah. I'm a taker. I look like a giver, but I'm really a taker. That was Avram Avinu with these guests. He saw people who looked like they were in a rush, and he had to beg them to come. When you're in a rush, you have to make a plane, you have an appointment, and somebody says, just stop in my house for a few minutes. You know you're a prisoner. You can't just leave somebody's house. And you're looking at your watch every minute. When am I going to get out of here already? I'm going to miss the plane. I'm going to miss the appointment. Avram Avinu wanted to do a chesed for the sake of the people he's doing the chesed, not so he should look like a good host. Yeah, bring them in, bring them into the house, sit them down, but they're in a rush. That's not what's good for them. So he tells them, look, sit under the tree. You can get up and leave at any time you want. You're in a rush, there's milchiks, eat right away. Butter, milk, eat right away. You're not really in a rush. You just said that to make me feel good, that I shouldn't bother. I'm making a nice steak, meat meal, right? Wait, there's more to come. That's why he gave them milchiks and fleishiks. Because the milchiks you could eat right away, the fleishiks you want to, wait, depends on you. Whatever you want, that's what's good for me. I'll look like a better host if I keep you in my house and keep you for who knows how long. That's my taking. That's not my giving. Giving accommodates the person who you're giving to. So you can look like a giver, but you're really a taker. That's schus. The Rebbeinu Shem gave us the mitzvah of sukkah. The Rebbeinu Shem gave us anoni akovid. But he knew that we're human beings and we have to see walls around us and something on the top. So he gave us, to accommodate the chesed to us, he gave us a mitzvah sukkahs mamish also. And that's schus. That Avram Avinu was accommodating the chesed to the guests, not to what would make him look good. The Rebbeinu Shalom also accommodated the mitzvah to us, not only to what his needs were. That is how giving can really be taking. How about the other way? How can you actually take and be a giver? First way is the following. You take in order to give. I remember when I was a teenager in Miami, the Satmarov, the Alter Satmarov, Michoel, used to come to Miami. And in Miami, there weren't too many Chassidish Rebbes. And it was a novelty to go see a Chassidish Rebbe. So I remember going to just observe what this Rebbe was. And I remember the Satmarov had a big robe that he wore with 2 gigantic pockets in the front. And they were filled with $100 bills, stuffed, flowing out of the pockets, both of them. I remember thinking to myself, when I grow up, I'm going to be a Rebbe. No, why? People would come with kvitlach for brachas, and he had rich Hasidim, and they would give him $100 bills. And he'd stuff it in the pocket until the pocket was overflowing. So one would think the Satmar Rebbe is a taker. Then I saw people would come in, crying, tell him this sob story, another sob story. He'd put his hand in the pocket, not even look. Take out a wad of bills and hand it to the person until the pockets were empty. And then they'd fill up again with people coming for brachas. And then they'd empty again. He didn't even look to see what he's giving. Give this one, this one. Could say that Satmar Rebbe is a taker? No, he's a clearinghouse. He didn't have money of his own to give. People wanted to give him. And he's a Rebbe, he deserves to take it. But he didn't take it for himself. He took it in order to be able to give. Taking in order to be able to give is called giving. I'll prove it to you. We said before that the heart is a symbol of Chesed. Leiv Tov. Why? Because the heart gives blood to the whole body. But if you learn biology, physiology, you know that the heart takes in as much blood as it gives out. The heart takes in blood from the whole body too. And then it gives out that blood. So why is the heart more of a giver than a taker? The answer is very simple. The blood that the heart takes in from the body is not for the sake of the heart. The blood supply of the heart is on the outside of the heart. What it takes inside the heart is to send it to the lungs, to get it oxygenated, and then to send it to the rest of the body with oxygen. And then it takes back the blood that the oxygen's been taken out of in order to send it back to the lungs. So that which the heart takes blood from the body is not for itself. It's to be able to give it back to the body with oxygen. So we see from here that taking in order to give is called giving. Because the heart is the symbol of chesed, of giving. Even though it takes as much as it gives, but it doesn't take for itself. It takes in order to give. That's why Avram Avinu took from Paro. The Rebbeinu Shalom promised Avram Avinu he would make him rich. He didn't tell him he's going to send him care packages from the sky. And then Paro did a terrible thing to Sarah, and he wanted to make up for it. And he wanted to give him presents, and Avram Avinu deserved to take it. And Avram Avinu had debts, the Chazal say. From all the places he stayed, he had not a penny to his name. He had tremendous amounts of students to support. If he didn't take it, he couldn't give to these people who he had to give to. So he saw the Rebbeinu Shalom was giving him this through Paro in order he should be able to have what to give. That's taking in order to give. That's called giving. That's what he took from Paro. There's a second kind of taking that's called giving. A person takes to give kavod to the person he's taking from. When I first became a Rav in Miami, I was very young, and I wanted to be a big tzaddik. So I decided, look, I get a salary. Now looking back on it, that wasn't really a salary, but in any case, I thought I got a salary. And I can live on the salary. I don't need to take presents. I don't need to be dependent on anyone. Soni matanas yichya. So I made it my policy that I'm not taking presents from anyone. People like to give the Rav a present. They go to Eretz Yisrael, they come back with a present for the Rav. People give presents, Chanukah, Purim. I don't take any presents, nothing. And this went on for about 6 months. People came, they offered me presents at different times, and I said, I'm sorry, my policy is I don't take presents from anyone. I appreciate it, but I won't take it. Until about 6 months into my Rabbanus, one of the elderly members of my Kehillah came to me and said, Rabbi, you'll excuse me if I'm blunt, but I have something important to tell you. You think you're a big tzaddik that you don't take presents, but you should know you're insulting these people by not taking their presents. They want the kavod of the Rav taking their present, and you're telling them it doesn't mean anything to you. Take it. You don't want to use it. You want to give it to it's your business. But at least give them the kavod. Give them the honor of taking the present they want to give you. And he was right 100%. There's a Gemara in Kedushin. The Gemara says that in order to effect a marriage, a man has to give to the woman. And he has to say to her, At Mekudeshesli. If the woman gives to the man, it's no Kedushin. She gives him. Even if he says, Harayat Mekudeshesli, with what you gave me, it's no Kedushin. The man has to give the woman. There is an exception. An Adam Chashuv. A person who doesn't usually take presents, and people vie to give that person presents. A king, a president. And it's a kavod for them that the president took my present. He has it. And people would pay money to convince that person to take the present. So a woman who gives such a person a present, and the man says, with that enjoyment you got that I took your present, and you would have paid money to somebody to convince me to take it, I'm marrying you. It's a good kedusha. Why? Because his taking is really giving. Sometimes you have to take in order to give honor to the person that you're taking from. You're not doing it because you want to take. You're doing it because you want to give kavod to the person who's giving you, who wants that kavod. Take from him to give him the kavod. So the main thing, that's why Avram Avinu took from Avimelech. Avimelech was terribly embarrassed of what he did with Sarah. And he wanted to show that Avram Avinu didn't hold any grudge. So he offered Avram Avinu presents. If Avram Avinu would have refused it, he would have been insulting and embarrassing Avimelech. But in order to cover up for Avimelech's embarrassment, he took it in order to give the kavod to Avimelech, that he should be able to make amends for what he did. That's the second kind of taking that's really giving. And the third kind is perhaps the most important. And I'm glad that there's a majority of women here because it really applies to the women more than the men. There is a syndrome called the Jewish wife and Jewish mother syndrome. Women, Jewish women, most of the time to their credit, like to be martyrs. They don't like to take anything, they don't like to give, they like to sacrifice, sometimes to the absurd, right? You're sitting at the table, there's a little kid, a wife and a husband, and they have enough food in the house to feed an army. And they serve the meal, and the wife says, no, give it to my son, I can't eat, right? Give it to the child. Well, you give it to the child. You could give it to 1,000 people, right? There's still enough food. There's enough food for you to eat 10 portions. You're not taking anything. No, not for me, only for my husband, only for my child. On the surface, that looks very good. But in every relationship, there's a give and a take. And if one of the sides of the relationship only wants to give, that means that they designate the other person to always be a taker, which is very demeaning. Sometimes you have to take in order to enable the other person to be a giver, to give them the kavod of being able to give. Otherwise, you reduce them to a taker all the time. That's why Avram Avinu took from Melchizedek. Melchizedek wanted to give Meiser. There was no other Kohen in the world. If Avram didn't take from Melchizedek, he would not afford Melchizedek the ability to be a giver. So he took in order to give Melchizedek the ability to give. Those are three cases where a person's taking is really giving. The only case where Avram Avinu didn't take, where it was pure taking. Melech Sodom didn't get any kavod from anybody taking from him. He wanted everything for himself. Shali, shalcha, shali, v'shalcha, shali. And he only gave it begrudgingly because he thought Avram Avinu wouldn't give him back his people. So Avram Avinu realized over here none of those things apply. Taking is pure taking. Pure taking I don't do. Keep your things. So a person has to be a chacham also to know when receiving is really giving and when it appears to be giving and you're really the taker. So it's not necessarily who's giving out and who is receiving, who's the giver and the taker. It takes a lot of chachma to know what real chesed is. And therefore the main idea of chesed is not the action, but it's avas chesed. It's having a love to be a giver. And then you'll figure out how to make it work out practically. Sometimes you'll receive in order to do that. Sometimes you'll give out in order to do that. How do I know that avas chesed is the major thing? In the Meiser cycle, the first 2 years, you give Meiser Rishon and Meiser Sheni. Meiser Rishon goes to the Levi, and Meiser Sheni you bring up to Yerushalayim and eat there yourself. It's yours. But you have to bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it there. 2 years. The third year, in the place of Meiser Sheni, you give Meiser Ani, you give it to the Aniyim. The fourth and fifth year again, Meiser Sheni. The sixth year, Meiser Ani. Always bothered me. 2 out of the 3 years of the cycle, you take it for yourself, and 1 year you give it to the Aniyim. Wouldn't it be better, the opposite? 2 years give to Aniyim, and 1 year give to yourself. And also the order doesn't make sense. First 2 years, get it for yourself. The third year, you give it to the Ani. Wouldn't it be better, the first 2 years, give it to an Ani, and then the Rabban Shem says, you're such a nice person. For 2 years, you gave it to the Ani. This year, I'm going to let you keep it for yourself. Right? Eat it in Yerushalayim. That would make more sense. Not the other way around. So why did the Rabban Shem do it the other way? I think the Rabban Shem wanted us to learn that you can realize that the money's not yours. Your tvua, you planted, you plowed, you harvested, but it's not yours. Because the Rabban Shem said, I made it all happen. None of that could happen just because of what you did. It's all my doing. It's all mine. I'm going to let you enjoy it, but you're going to have to do it the way I tell you. Bring it to Yerushalayim. Eat it the way I'm telling you. Understand that the money is not yours, it's mine. I let you enjoy it. And I want you to enjoy it. But I want you to enjoy it by doing what I tell you to do with it. After 2 years of learning that lesson, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, now I'm going to tell you what to do with my money. I want you to give it to the Ani. And I want you to enjoy it just as much. That's Avas Chesed. The Iker is not what you give. The Rambam says if you give begrudgingly, it's worse than not giving. I want you to enjoy giving. I want you to have an Avas Chesed. I want you to be an Ohev, to be a Nosei. So 2 years you'll practice of taking your money and using it for your own purpose, but the way I tell you to do it, and get the understanding that it's my money, I can tell you what to do with it, and I want you the third year to enjoy the same way by giving it to an Ani. Once gave some money to a family member for Yontif. And then I found that after Yontif, he gave it away to some Ani. So I told him, I wanted you to have that money. I wanted you to have Simchas Yontif. He said, that was my Simchas Yontif. I felt like 2 cents. That I didn't think of that. But in any case, that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants. That you should realize that if he tells you how to use it, you can enjoy it just as much eating it or giving it to someone else, if that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants you to do. You can enjoy being a nosei. That's Avas Chesed. Chazal say that a person who wants to be a chassid, who wants to be a nosei, he wants to be a giver, should occupy himself in milei de avos, milei de brachos, or milei de nezikin. Nezikin, be very careful how you deal with other people, don't harm them. That's bein adam lechavero of chesed. That's the chesed that comes from v'yahavta reacha kamocha, which is the umbrella mitzvah of chesed. And then there is brachos. That's the other side of chesed. V'halachta b'dracha, be like the Rabbanu Shalom. The Rabbanu Shalom's a giver, you be a giver. How do you get to be like the Rabbanu Shalom? Get to know him. How do you get to know him? From all of the things that he gives. Hatov v'hametiv. You recognize the hatov from the native. So make a bracha and get to know the Rabbanu Shalom, and that'll also bring you to chesed. And lastly, milei de avos is divrei Torah. Because if you don't learn Torah and don't know how to put in practice that giving, sometimes you'll think you're giving and you're really taking, and sometimes you'll be taking and you're really giving. So therefore, you need Pirkei Avos, you need a place to tell you how important it is to learn Torah, so you'll be able to know how to put in practice that idea of giving. If you have those 3 things, then you'll be a chassid. So you can understand now why the midah of chesed is not just an isolated midah, but it's a midah that affects your bein adam lechavero and your bein adam lemakom, makes a person a different kind of person. And there you can understand why the niftarim excelled in chesed and yet had so many other milas, both bein adam lemakom in their tzidkis and bein adam lechavero and all the things they did, building a community. All the things they did, bein adam lechavero, all stemmed from that midah of chesed, because that is the foundation of everything. And if we learn that from them, then that's the greatest ilui neshama. And therefore their neshamos, in the schus of the divrei Torah, and the schus of their tremendous chesed, and the chesed that people will learn from them, the neshama should have an ilui neshama la'orech yomim tov.